I want you guys to reflect on what you guys saw and heard yesterday and how it influences your work. And I'm going to start with Sophie. Sophie, you're the National Field Director with the National Young Farmers Coalition, and you're working to organize a yes.
Just want to know, the tour is leaving, who's ever on the tour?
Tour is leaving.
Sorry.
That's okay, now I don't know where I was. You're working to organize a grassroots base of young farmers across the country. How does this history or organizing in the past impact the work of your coalition moving forward?
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. I also, hearing Mark Ritchie yesterday, had a big impact. He said that the farm crisis was planned policy, not handed down from God, but deliberate. And I think that we're in that same boat now, and young farmers today don't fully understand the extent to which the policies that are in place are impacting their farms and preventing a lot of their success. And these young farmers in our coalition, so we're a national coalition. We have chapters in 28 states across the country, and these young farmers who are stepping up are incredibly motivated to change the food system, and they see the brokenness of it, and they want to make an impact. And our work is really to mobilize them that there's so much that they can do on their farm, but they need to do more. We need to do more together to start to affect this structural change that we really need. And it's going to take all of us working together to get there. And I think what I really found yesterday was the importance of knowing the history moving forward, because there's so many incredible people in this room who fought this corporate control, and we have so much to learn from you, and we are not going to move forward without knowing what's happened in the past. That wouldn't serve us at all. So we started 5 years ago in the Hudson Valley of New York. A group of farmers were really struggling to grow their businesses. They were on rented land, and land in the Hudson Valley, just a couple hours out of New York City, is incredibly expensive, prohibitively. And there was no organization there that was working on behalf of young farmers. And so they realized, who better to represent young farmers than young farmers ourselves? So we need to step up. And there were groups organizing in other states that they joined with, and to create the National Young Farmers Coalition, to leverage our voices as young farmers to make change on the national scale. And we knew we needed a voice in the Farm Bill. So that was the first thing we did, is we had farmers meet with our members of Congress across the country, and we wrote, along with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and other partners, this bill, the Beginning Farmer and Rancher Opportunity Act. It's a marker bill, so it has many provisions that, if included in the Farm Bill, would help young farmers. And I was so reminded of it yesterday in the work of the Congress in writing the National Family Farm Act, and so inspired by the amount of grassroots networking that went into that. We had farmers meet with their representatives across the country to ask for their support of this act. But the idea of having these meetings in 500 places to elect delegates to come to this Congress, the extent of that grassroots representation is incredible, and something that I really hope that the National Young Farmers Coalition is able to achieve moving forward in the work that we do, to reach that scale and that incredible buy-in, so that everyone is represented. And we won. In 2014, the Farm Bill passed. We made a lot of incredible changes. We started with the Farm Service Agency, a microloan program that now, we needed access to credit that was met for the scale of our farm operations. So now we can get up to $50,000, really low barriers to entry in getting that capital. And that program is jump-starting farm operations all over the country. We also saved the training program funding, the development program in the Farm Bill. That's $20 million a year that you all know is incredibly important in training farmers. And we worked to change some USDA programs to make them more accessible for young, beginning, diversified organic farmers, not just the commodity operations that they're really designed for. So we're working with USDA really closely to make those changes. And we're working on student loans now, which is something we've wanted to do from the beginning. It's preventing young people from succeeding in agriculture. It is nearly impossible to start a farm business when you have, $30,000, $50,000 of student loan debt. And I was inspired by Shirley yesterday, her father's dream that she could get an education and come back to the farm. And that's really what we're trying to do in this campaign, is make it possible for kids who grow up on farms to get that education and not be so weighed down by their student loans that they can't come back to the farm. Or the young people like myself who didn't know about farming until I went to college and started working on my campus farm and fell in love with it. And we want people like that to be able to start farming even with that debt. So we have an act in Congress now called the Young Farmer Success Act, and it has 8 co-sponsors. It would add farmers to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which exists already for doctors and teachers and government employees and nonprofit workers. And we're incredibly excited about the potential for the government to recognize farming as a public service and empower young people to choose farming as a career, because that's one of the options they would have for loan forgiveness after 10 years of service. So, and maybe I'll talk more about that, but we're able to do this work because of our chapters and farmers on the ground. We have 2 of our chapter leaders here, Liberty and Leslie from the Missouri Young Farmers Coalition. So, yay! They're over there. So you should definitely say hi to them. But they are farming and organizing, and it's incredibly inspiring. Our leaders all across the country are doing that, and I think Stephen from Flag, I think it was in the video yesterday, he said that the circumstances are intolerable and we need to show people that they can do something about it. And I think that's what the National Young Farmers Coalition is doing, is working with these farmer leaders to be able to go into their communities and say, like, things are hard and there's something that we can do about it, and we need to work together to address those barriers. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Sophie. That's really, really good. I think it's really important to note that Farm Aid, especially starting during such hard times, has been a continued space for us all to get together, farmers, organizers, advocates, consumers, because I think it was Scott Marlowe said it yesterday about being in isolation, and that's where everybody starts. Well, Farm Aid makes us realize that we're not in isolation, that we're actually doing this all together. There are people out here that care about the things we care about, working towards the things we work for. So, Sophie, thank you very much. Amber Bell. Hi, Amber. Hey. Amber, you're the Director of Programs at the Southwest Georgia Project, working closely with Ms. Schroeder. I gather you've learned incredible things from Ms. Schroeder and her rich experience. And I think this is an important question. How can we establish very intentional space for intergenerational exchange and mentorship so that we can advance our collective work? I think it's important for us to realize and say out loud that we need that intergenerational movement towards the emerging leaders of the future. How did yesterday impact you?
Good morning. So yesterday was very clear. There were 2 things that we heard from just about every panelist, and it was their passion for the work and their passion for each other. And the stories that I've heard from Mrs. Schroeder and the stories that we heard on yesterday, it's just that they worked as a family. They organized as a family. And that's something that we have to do and continue to do, but we can't do it without the generation that's done it before us. We can't do it without their stories, knowing how they made it through, because it wasn't on pen and paper. It's not in the history books. So we have to learn, how did you make it through? Mr. Zippert said on yesterday, it was the fight for justice, his hard work, love for people, and his optimism that got him through. So in learning that, knowing that it may not be on paper, but if I have a dream or if I hope that things can happen with a network of people like we have here today, it's possible. The stories yesterday were encouraging. All of us, we were gathered in there this morning, we started reflecting on it, and it was just encouraging to hear the stories, and we heard the urgencies and the opportunities. They're here now. We still have the fight student loans. Ooh, hate those things. So we still have a fight today. And hearing the stories, I had the wonderful opportunity of working directly with Mrs. Schroeder, and you had the opportunity to work with Mr. Benny. And that's it. That's something we can't do. We get it often here at Farm Aid, but the opportunity to create a network between someone older and us is very important.
I will definitely echo that. I have the opportunity to work with Roger Allison and Rhonda Perry, who are my mentors, and I'm still learning from them, and hopefully now we're learning from each other a little bit. I think it's really important to continue learning. Katie Blanchard, you're the Assistant Director of the Real Food Challenge. You're working with students across the country to demand a just and sustainable food system in universities, right? How does this work, and how does yesterday, in the history of the farm movement and the United Farmer and Rancher Congress, inform your work with students, and how can we better connect the next generation of change makers to this work?
Great, thanks. I'm reflecting a lot about organizing, and in particular yesterday and today gathering, I'm really struck by the moral resources in this room, and that's something that we talk a lot about in talking about organizing. That okay. The moral resources are something that grow when you use them, as opposed to material resources, which we may not even have that many of in the first place, but also deplete when they are used. And I'm not sure that there's anything that grows moral resources more than organizing. Building courage and consciousness and heart, which we talked about so much yesterday, together with our neighbors. And I felt yesterday so much gratitude that it's clear that the work that I do with Real Food Challenge, which I'll talk about in a second, is tapping into the moral resources that you all have built for so long. And my hope is that we are growing them for the next generation, for our own work and into the future. And the way that looks in our work is that Real Food Challenge organizes to challenge corporate consolidation in the food service industry, which is such a major bottleneck in this country in terms of the whole food system. And so important to so many eaters, given that over 50% of meals are eaten outside the home. So I grew up in a little town in northern Michigan, standing up with my neighbors, like we talked about yesterday, especially with my mom, and a lot of people fighting our land being sold off to, the farm had already been sold, but sold off to Walmart and other big box stores, developing the rural landscape around where I grew up. And I went to college in a similar kind of town in southern Minnesota, but one where my neighbors were farmers. And the neighbors of my college were farmers, especially immigrants and young people who wanted to grow food and wanted to have a more secure market than was available in that place. And at the time, my college was not willing to be that market, wasn't willing to purchase from local producers and support the food system in that place. And that's something that made me really angry, given that I didn't see the institution being the neighbor that it could be in that place. And it also made me pretty worried about the future of rural places like this town where I went to school and like where I grew up. And I started being in touch with other students at the time when I was a student around the country, because this is yet another piece of this engineered crisis, right? It wasn't one mean person saying we won't buy from this farmer. It was the entire corporate food service industry saying we hold a major squeeze on who gets to sell food to institutions, and local producers are not, and small family producers are not among them. So over the past 5 years, Real Food Challenge has grown to be a network of hundreds of college campuses, students on hundreds of campuses, and we've secured over $70 million at universities to be shifted to local producers. And what I'm particularly excited about is something that happened last week. 100 students and farmers were on the steps of the president's office at Ohio State University after a year of organizing, demanding that Ohio State make this commitment. They purchase over $20 million in food every year. 20% of that went to local producers. It would be an enormous shift, and one that the producers there want in their community. And what's more striking to me is this is a room of people, the majority of you who I've heard where you're from are from the center of the country. And since I've been involved in this work, I haven't been able to see a lot of movement building among beyond the coasts. And it's really heartening to be in a room of people who are from the center of the country and be celebrating campaigns that are winning in the center of the country. And this rally that happened last week at Ohio State did not happen magically, like we talked about a lot yesterday. Organizing happens through all of the phone calls that so many of you women especially have made for decades, and all of the phone calls and meetings that we all continue to have that lead up to bigger actions. And this is the main work that Real Food Challenge does, which is grow the consciousness of eaters, young eaters and advocates who are pretty far removed, many of them, from farm and from our food system, and grow the skills of organizing and advocacy through campaigns to shift this really enormous amount of money and power that exists on university campuses. So that's hard work. And I think the work that we need to do together and that I'm inspired to do together is around building hope. I was incredibly heartened and felt strengthened hearing everyone's stories yesterday. I think because of what everyone said, that our strength is built out of coming together in times of struggle. And students right now facing student debt and state violence on campuses, particularly against Black and brown students, young people, and the fear of climate chaos. There's despair that a lot of young people feel, and I think I invite you all, and I hope campuses can invite you all to be engaged with universities and any schools in and around the communities where you live, because I think the more we're all sharing these stories, the deeper that well of hope and moral resource gets built.
Thank you, Katie. Organizing. It's about eating good food, yes. But we can't local food our way out of this. I mean, it's systemic, it's policy. We need to organize and find markets and change the marketplace. I completely agree. Hi, Jenny. Jenny is a lawyer, so beware, everybody. You're the staff attorney and director of the Farm and Food Initiative at the Conservation Law Foundation. You recently launched a legal services food hub in the Northeast, a free legal services clearinghouse. Yesterday was probably very impactful, just hearing about the law is important when it comes to doing this work. Missouri Rural Crisis Center is the organization in Missouri that gets called from the Farm Aid hotline when farmers are in distress in Missouri and need legal help and financial help. So I hear you, and we get those calls. So what did it mean for you to hear about the advocates' work over the past 3 decades? And did it shift anything for you in terms of your thinking about your work?
Good morning, everybody. It's really great to be here. Very affirming day yesterday, as was said. So I come from an environmental organization. You might be wondering, why are you here? I'm not a farmer. I come from an environmental organization in New England. So Conservation Law Foundation is an environmental advocacy group in New England, and I'm from Boston. We do work throughout the 6 New England states. And we have the perspective that it's important for environmental organizations to care about the farm and food system. And I hope that you're finding that the environmental groups where you come from are starting to move in that direction. We're finding that they are, but I think it's really wonderful for environmental advocates to be part of this conversation and for us to be building community together. So I'm really glad to be here. Our work in New England is really shaped around trying to support the family farms that make New England so special, what make our region great. And those farms are so important to stewarding the land in our region, and that's why we see it as positive for the environment. Our law and policy work at CLF that focuses on farm and food really tries to do 3 things. One is to increase regional thinking around farm and food issues to get the 6 New England states working together, because those boundaries are really kind of artificial, and we need each other to get this work done. 2 is to do direct service work with farmers and food entrepreneurs, and that's what the Legal Services Food Hub is that Tim described. This is a program that provides free legal help to lower income farmers and food entrepreneurs. And we started doing this because we found that in our region, nobody was doing that. Our fellow technical service providers that work with farmers, I would talk to them and say, maybe some of you are familiar with Land for Good in New England, and say, where do you send your clients at the end of your assistance if they need to, sell their farm to another person outside the family or transition it through an estate process to someone in the family? Where are these lawyers that you're sending them to? They didn't have a very long list. It was really one or two. And I said, that's really something that we got to do something about. There's tons of lawyers in this region. Many of them are so supportive of the farm and food movement and have skills that they could bring to help. We've got to make that connection. So that direct service is really important. And the third thing is policy reform. And what I found so remarkable yesterday was it really struck me the importance of a matrix of strategies for achieving the goals that we were talking about. There was a lot of talk about helping that individual farm, bringing the farmers together to make a movement, taking that movement and achieving revolutionary goals, high-level policy reform. Many of our organizations work on one of those pieces, maybe we work on a couple, but all of them are necessary to really achieve our goals. We need that day-to-day help so that people can get out of bed in the morning and keep that farm going one more day. But we also need that revolutionary change so that it's not just about getting by day to day, because nobody can survive like that for very long. And that was affirming for me to hear, because that is the approach that we've tried to take within the organization. The Legal Services Food Hub, we get to work with farmers day to day to fix their problems so that the doors can stay open one more day. But doing that work makes us better at the policy advocacy that we do. Hearing those problems on the ground is what enables us to learn what policies need to change and how to change them. And so I think that was affirming to hear that. One thing that I think we can learn from folks who've been doing this work for a long time is how to build a cohesive movement. I don't know how others are feeling about the work that we're doing today, but to me, it feels like there's quite a bit of division within folks working on these issues. Maybe I'm especially sensitive to it as someone coming from the environmental community, because I can tell you there are some agricultural meetings I go to where we're not super welcome. Maybe you've experienced that. I didn't want to say it, but right. So, and to me, it seems like if we can't bridge that gap, we're going to be very, very stuck. We really need to work together. So that's one big example of a division, but there are other divisions too. And that cohesiveness, we can't get that right. I like hearing about the Congress and 2,000 different meetings where the resolutions that came out of each of those meetings were really very similar. I wish I could say that about the meetings that I'm going to, just in my region, that the goals were similar. And frankly, I'm finding that we're having to leave a lot of important issues off the table because we can't come to agreement. So for instance, I'm working on the Massachusetts Food System Plan right now. We're just not talking about GMOs because we just can't get close to being on the same page about whether that's something we should be including or not. So we're just not talking about it. That's probably not a great strategy, right? These are important issues and we should be able to try and come together. And so I was just so impressed with the cohesiveness among the advocates yesterday. And I think there's something really to what you learned from working in rural communities, and the story of the banker and the farmer walking down the aisle in the church together really struck me, that because they were part of the same community, they had to learn to get on the same page. And I hope that we can continue to work toward trying to see ourselves as part of the same community, because I think that will really help us achieve our goals.
able to
Talking about price and cost of production, that is a good argument to pass more free trade agreements that bottom out the price so that, yeah, it's perfect. They've worked out really well for us in the past. I think it's important, what Joe said, you know, I work for the Rural Crisis Center. We get a lot of calls too. A lot of the calls are from people where industrial livestock operations are moving next door. And I think just like people that are in financial distress, when a CAFO is moving next door, hearing that in people's voices, it's hard to describe. And being able to listen, I think, is really important in the work that we do, because a lot of folks just need somebody to listen to them, you know, and that sort of understands. And I want to thank everybody very much. This has been inspiring for me. I would like to just go back to the populist moment one more time. Lawrence Goodwin, everybody read it. But in the book, and this is paraphrasing, and it was quoting a different person. Lawrence Goodwin didn't write this. But back in the 1890s, somebody used an analogy of shaking a tree. And they said, you know, people just wanted the truth. And people were like ripe fruit. And all you had to do was shake the tree, and people would come. So I think it's important that we keep talking to people, because I think people are like ripe fruit. I think we have to tell the truth. We have to be organizers. We need to shake that tree, because I think we have the knowledge, we have the truth, we have the love on our side, and we need to work towards what we know is right. So thank you everybody so much. I appreciate it.